So I'm going to be doing a series of videos on the policing organizations in Canada and their ties and affiliations. Unfortunately, I will not be talking about Rocco Galati because he is worthy of making a giant video on himself. That's another rabbit hole. So the other most gleaming affiliation to me is the Canadian Citizens for Charter Rights and Freedoms, otherwise known as CIRF. So while standing up for Canadian charter rights, they oppose Motion M103, which I'll show you, the UN Agenda 2030, Global Compact on Migration, and the distorted use of Islamophobia, which basically is covered in Motion M103, which all in the name of hate speech or Islamophobia is a way to silence people, as if we have not seen enough of that throughout the years. Mozid was launched in 2015 to promote anything that is essentially said in the charter, with the added ideas of responsible environmentalism, fight violence, intimidation, and terror against people anywhere in the world. And they're not a charity, but they're a registered not-for-profit organization, and charities are restricted by law to how much they can devote to political advocacy, how directly they can lobby or support a position, elected person, or party. As a non-governmental organization, we're not restricted. So they can get involved in politics and stretch their arms a little further. And Mozid contributed to creating CIRF. Just so we're clear as to why I'm talking about them, and why I'm going to be talking a little bit about Israel, including with CIJA, Mozid, Project Abraham, and the Conservative Party of Canada infiltration. So, CIJA, what it is the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, and they're basically pushing a anti-free speech agenda and silencing people in the name of hate speech who share uncomfortable truths. What else is new? Just talking about that. And for many years, CIJA has been lobbying for the federal government to make licensing of media personalities mandatory. And this is so that the Israeli lobby can claim hate speech to shut down people and views that they disagree with. It can also be used to silence those who speak uncomfortable truths. Okay, so Israel can be meddling in Canadian affairs now, it seems. Now, Mozid Freedom Organization, we're going to talk more about them. It started out as a human rights organization that advocated for free speech, democracy, the rule of law, in support of Israel. They recently decided to enter the political fray, mostly on the side of small C conservative candidates and parties, which we'll gloss over. And in an interview with Irving Weisdorf, who is the CEO of Mozid, somebody's name came up named Salim Mansour, and again, I apologize if I butcher the pronunciation of these names. So Salim is a professor at University of Western for political science, and he's an immigrant from the Punjab region, and he was supposedly vying for a seat in the riding of London North Centre for the PPC. Whoa, lost my place momentarily. Excuse me. And anyway, this group, Mozid, was awarded third-party status by Elections Canada, meaning that they're free to promote their Israel First agenda in Canadian politics. So, Salim Mansour is also a pro-Israel Muslim, and that's why a lot of Muslim groups don't actually want him around. And I just want to be clear with you that the Israeli government is very underrated, not spoken about too often in this country, as well as their intelligence community, which works quite closely with both CSIS and the CIA. But we'll just focus on the article here so I can show you what I specifically know about them here. And so Project Abraham was once previously Mozid, as we can see. And it's Project Abraham previously, Mossad, Resettlement and Support for Victims of Persecution, is a Jewish group aiming to being people to the West. Okay? So, now we're going to go over some of these candidates here that we can see that are Conservative Party candidates. And those are Mossad's political references right there. Pierre Poilievre as well is the name that I recognize out of all of those. So it's interesting that this third party organization supports both Conservative Party and PPC candidates, depending on their views. Can we assume that they're all very much pro-Israel and pro-Zionist? Well, I mean, I can definitely say Stephen Harper was for sure, if we look at him, because he is widely praised in Israel to the point where they literally built the Stephen Harper Center in his honor. So now I gotta do a large amount of scrolling, and excuse me, I don't actually have a mouse, so this is why I'm not exactly so steady. So John Baird is the director of CIJA, which I was talking about earlier, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. This is a huge conflict of interest, and he was a former Minister of Foreign Affairs in Canada, by the way. So, yeah, that is kind of a huge, huge conflict of interest right there. He was already dealing with foreign affairs before, and now is dealing with foreign affairs on Israel's side. Like, how does that even make any sense? It's kind of like when Maxime Bernier lost his documents and left them in his Hells Angels affiliated girlfriend's car. Remember that? That's how he has supposedly lost his position as Minister of Foreign Affairs. So, sorry, I'm just scrolling past a lot of different political members here of different parties. And now we're back to Salim Mansour, who I mentioned that came up in that phone interview with the CEO of Mossad. Again, sorry about the mouse issues here. He's a professor of political science at Western, and he's as well a former columnist, at London Free Press and the Toronto Sun, and has contributed to a lot of publications, including the National Review, the Middle East Forum, and Front Page Mag, and he often presents his own analysis on the Muslim world throughout South Asia and the Middle East. And again, like I said, Muslim groups don't want him around because of him being a Zionist working for Israel. And we're going to be talking about the Middle East, or sorry, not the Middle East Forum, but we're going to be addressing Gatestone Institute eventually, because that name does pertain to Tom Quiggin over here, who's the next subject of interest. Tom Quiggin is one who essentially talks about quote-unquote Islamic extremism and is supposedly a terrorism expert and ex-military. However, the thing is, he always avoids speaking about Benjamin Netanyahu or any Israeli leader of sorts. And I think that when you're leaving out very gleaming information, I just want to point a finger at you and do a control op. And we're going to see even more about Tom Quiggin in a second. I just want to tell you once again that all Canadian parties shill for Israel. We can look at some examples here, like Jason Kenney, for instance, in Alberta, Justin Trudeau, quite obviously, Jagmeet Singh, and so on and so forth. So this is what Gatestone Institute is, what I just mentioned to you. Here's its little fun description. A nonpartisan, not-for-profit international policy council and think tank dedicated to educating the people about the mainstream media fails to report in promoting blah, 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 blah. Basically, it's a very ominous name, International Policy Council, and they're influencing policy and media primarily, I guess, worldwide. Now, they're also, this think tank here is promoting Tom Quiggin. So, that should say enough right there. I mean, most people who actually talk about anything real are 6 feet under, so, I mean, I wonder why this guy's still alive and kicking. And one of his videos as well was actually shared on Artur Pawlowski's channel, the priest or pastor out in Western Canada there. And here's a video that has Maxime Bernier, Tariq Fatah, who is kind of like a far left guy who supports LGBT and quote-unquote progressive Islam, and as well supports the UN Global Compact at face value. Maxime Bernier apparently doesn't, according to this video, but I've shown other information that shows contrary to that. But this is clearly just some swamped interview that doesn't really go anywhere. And it's just to show you that Maxime Bernier and Tom Quiggin both knew each other. So I'm going to be talking to you about the other policing organizations in other videos to come. In the meantime, take care of yourself, and remember that Israel plays a very big part in what's going on here.